Right, so AEW has a very wide roster with nearly 200 active wrestlers on the AEW roster. And with the AEW roster continuing to grow, it means many wrestlers in AEW can get lost in the shuffle, with AEW running out of ideas for them and not finding any use for them on AEW TV. And the wrestlers we are talking about today in this video fall under that category, but they are also wrestlers that I believe would probably be better off if they were in a different company, either your WWE's or your TNA or any other company. These are AEW wrestlers that struggle to really fit in with AEW, and I feel as though would be much better off in a different company. So like the video as we talk about the first person on this list who was a wrestler who took the previous company they were in by storm, rising to the very top and taking over that company, but have very much fell flat in AEW, as the virtuosa Deonna Purrazzo currently struggles to find any TV time, and AEW seemingly have no plans for her and her stable. Deonna Purrazzo's wrestling career began in 2012 and she worked all across the independent scene, including for Ring of Honor, did some appearances for TNA, worked a couple of tours for Stardom in Japan, and even made a couple of jobber appearances for the WWE, where she would officially sign for them in 2018. And she would take part in that year's Mae Young Classic, making it to the quarterfinals before losing, and would make a couple of appearances for WWE across their NXT and NXT UK brands, with Deonna not really ever finding a home in WWE and never really being cemented as a character or a member of the roster. And while there were teases of a team with her and Chelsea Green to appear on NXT, the plans were cancelled for that, and Deonna Purrazzo was released from WWE during their COVID budget cuts, having done pretty much nothing in the WWE for about 2 years. But following her release from the WWE, Deonna Purrazzo would go over to TNA very quickly after, and on her debut match would win the Knockouts Championship in a great match against Jordynne Grace. And this would be the start of Deonna Purrazzo's return to TNA and her 3-year run in TNA, which went very well for Deonna Purrazzo, where arguably throughout her entire run, she was the top star of TNA. Throughout her time in TNA, she won the Knockouts Championship 3 times, having great matches and feuds with Jordynne Grace in particular for the title. And when she wasn't the Knockouts Champion, she was holding the Ring of Honor and the AAA belts on TV as well. And her and Chelsea Green's team that never came to be in NXT would finally make their debut in Impact as VXT and win the TNA Knockouts tag titles. And yeah, like I said, Deonna really was the top dog throughout her time in TNA wrestling. She even made an AEW appearance during her time in TNA, as she made a main event appearance on Dynamite once as she wrestled Mercedes Martinez for her Ring of Honor World Championship. And eventually, of course, Deonna Purrazzo would make it to AEW full-time and depart TNA, as she left TNA at the end of 2023 and would debut for AEW on the January 3rd, 2024 episode of AEW Dynamite, immediately inserting herself into a feud with Women's Champion Toni Storm. And this feud I thought was a very good feud in AEW. They acknowledged their past history, they had some cool cinematic shots and visuals using Toni Storm's whole black and white gimmick to their advantage. However, the match itself wasn't super amazing, I don't think. It was alright, and Toni Storm did get the win to retain the title. And ever since then, Deonna Purrazzo's time in AEW has been very inconsistent, with AEW kind of struggling to give her any consistent TV time, as they seem to do alright for a bit after the Toni Storm feud, as she feuded with Thunder Rosa on a little TV feud for the next few months. And of course, she would form the Vendetta alongside Taya Valkyrie, which seemed to be a new stable, as they would begin teasing the addition of new members. But since then, Deonna Purrazzo's TV time has been extremely scarce, as she hardly appears on TV anymore, and it felt like each week the Vendetta were just kind of cutting the same old promo with nothing actually happening of substance with the group, and no new member was ever joining. It came out in the last couple of months that Deonna had complained to management about the fact that there was no real direction for her going on on right now, which I kind of agree with. Like, why tease something if you're never going to follow through on it? And it was revealed recently in a report from Fightful Select that there are no immediate creative plans for Deonna Purrazzo in AEW, and despite the fact they teased a new member of Purrazzo's Vendetta faction, there was never a plan actually in place for a new member to be added, and they were never going to follow through and deliver on this. And yeah, Deonna Purrazzo is a wrestler I really like. She really is one of my favorite wrestlers in the entire industry, but I just think she'd be better off suited in either WWE if she returned there, maybe had an NXT run, or went back to TNA where she could easily be the number one wrestler there once again like she was before. Deonna is a very good wrestler. I think she could have worked in AEW, but clearly she's just drowned in the depths of the current women's division, and if AEW has no plans for her, then I can't really see her doing much for the rest of her AEW career, and she would definitely be much better off in a company that isn't All Elite Wrestling, in my opinion. And the same can also be said for this guy, who at one point AEW seemed to be all in on and seemed to be having a big push in the works for, but they just never followed through on it, and I can't remember the last time that we saw Wardlow. So yeah, Wardlow's career in AEW has been very tumultuous, because seriously, where the fuck is that guy? It's been like a year, where is he? Wardlow came into AEW in their first year in 2019, and he immediately became MJF's bodyguard in a role that was very suited for him at that time. And he was very good in this role as well, and he was with MJF through all the stables and storylines that he was a part of. And of course, Wardlow and MJF's partnership was never gonna last forever, and so there were always teases of when they were going to break up, and everyone knew there was going to be a big storyline and big match for when they did. And it finally happened when Wardlow would help CM Punk to defeat MJF in that awesome dog collar match they had at Revolution 2022. Wardlow and MJF would then face at Double or Nothing 2022, with Wardlow absolutely squashing MJF, and people really thought that Wardlow was going to be catapulted to the moon in AEW booking wise after this moment and have a shot for the world title potentially. But the issue came the very next night on AEW Dynamite, when MJF cut his work shoot promo calling Tony Khan a mark and telling him to fire him, and it just completely overshadowed that entire moment with Wardlow beating MJF. But Wardlow would go on to some success, as he would become the TNT champion that year in a reign that very much fell flat. In fact, Wardlow had 3 TNT title reigns in AEW, and all of them fell completely flat due to AEW just not giving him any credible opponents or storylines, and not making him feel like a strong champion or that the belt was important. This was a really bad time for the TNT title belt. This was the Sammy Guevara, Scorpio Sky, Wardlow era, just absolutely dire. And following his loss of the TNT belt, Wardlow would then join the Undisputed Kingdom alongside Adam Cole, Roderick Strong, Mike Bennett and Matt Taven, as they were the Devils in the Devil storyline, and they went after MJF. As Wardlow, now 4 years later, was literally right back to square one, being the muscle of a heel stable. He had a world title match against Samoa Joe that he lost, and he did some more stuff with the Undisputed Kingdom, you know, the most useless and terrible stable in AEW history that literally just dissolved into thin air and doesn't even exist anymore or get acknowledged, with Wardlow just straight up disappearing from AEW in April 2024. At first it was reported that he had an injury following a car accident. However, it was then later reported that AEW now just has absolutely no plans for Wardlow, and he is just stuck in limbo. I can't even begin to explain enough how over Wardlow was following that Double or Nothing win over MJF, and I guess AEW just weren't expecting that reaction and didn't know what to do with it, as yeah, he really did nothing of note since, and the TNT title reigns only worsened Wardlow's career in the end and hurt the TNT title belts in the process as well. So yeah, it's been nearly a year since Wardlow just disappeared off AEW TV. He's not been seen or heard from on AEW TV since, and Wardlow is just so obviously a guy who would work in the WWE so much more well and so much better, and he's just a guy that I can easily picture in NXT. He could easily go on a similar path to what Ethan Page has done in NXT, and hey, speaking of Ethan Page's former Men of the Year partner has had it just as rough in AEW. Scorpio Sky came into AEW as an original signing in 2019 as part of SoCal Uncensored alongside Daniels and Kaz. They were established as a top team instantly when Scorpio and Kazarian became the inaugural AEW Tag Team Champions. During this time, Scorpio also had a short storyline with world champion Chris Jericho, which actually got him over, as he was the first man in AEW to pin Jericho and then would lose a title match against Jericho, but like I said, it got him over, and it was said that AEW saw him as a future singles star. SCU would lose the titles at the start of 2020, and after that, Scorpio would begin his career as a singles competitor, but it didn't last long, as the next year in 2021, he would form the Men of the Year with Ethan Page, turning heel in the process. They spent much of that year feuding with Darby Allin and Sting and being stuck in the Jericho-verse like I said earlier. But Scorpio actually got out of the other side pretty okay, and in 2022 would win his first bit of singles gold when he won the TNT title off of Sammy Guevara on the March 9th Dynamite. And this would see a feud between the two where they traded the TNT title back and forth in a feud that kind of killed the TNT belt, and it just wasn't booked very well, and Scorpio as a result had two pretty short and underwhelming TNT title reigns that really didn't elevate him whatsoever, and especially didn't elevate the belt. And after losing the TNT title as well as the Men of the Year fizzling out, Scorpio really got lost in the shuffle in AEW. He just became another member of the large stacked roster and has just disappeared from AEW multiple times, with AEW even teasing a return for him at one point, but it just simply never materializing. He's not been seen on AEW or Ring of Honor programming since October 2023, and AEW clearly hasn't had a plan for him for the last 2 years now. It really does look like AEW just simply gave up on him. But guys, that's it from me on this video here. If you did enjoy, then be sure to smash that like button and let me know any wrestlers in the comments down below in AEW that you think would probably be better off if they were in another company as well. And your thoughts on Deonna Purrazzo, Wardlow and Scorpio Sky situations in AEW currently, as well as leaving a like on that video if you did enjoy and subscribing with notifications on so you never miss a video. I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye and keep on rolling.